You know, I've been doing a little bit of thinking lately. And yes, I realize I'm doing this on my original YouTube account and not my Shadowbird Studios account. It's because I don't want to take any attention on my Shadowbird account away from my recent Let's Play right now. But I've been doing some thinking about this whole Occupy Wall Street movement and the Tea Party before it and protesting in general. As most of you fine Americans know, and probably most of you people who aren't American out there, in fact, those of you who aren't American probably know this better than the people who live in America. According to the United States Constitution, we have the right, guaranteed by the First Amendment, to peacefully assemble and address grievances against our government. Basically, if our government's messed up, we can call them on it and not get any repercussions against us for it. In theory, the United States is a country better suited to free protests than any other country in the world. So that begs the question, why is the United States the only country that cannot seem to get the idea of peaceful protest right? It's mind-boggling to me how, for the most part, our protests here quickly devolve into shouting sessions. Everybody says a lot, but nobody's really saying anything. You know, the Tea Party started out with a good idea, you know, don't raise taxes on us. It started out with a good idea, then the far right, or as I lovingly call them, hypercons, terrorize, took control of it, and it basically became something far more extreme than it was originally supposed to be. It basically ended up being a liberal bash session. And I'm not a liberal by any stretch of the imagination, but that still hits on my nerves, because I'm not one who likes loud, bombastic, annoying people. It's just the way that I am. And then, on the other hand, we have the Occupy Wall Streeters, and again, noble goals started out. They wanted to basically make the government take a look at Wall Street and take a look at everything that's been done by big financial organizations to lead to the recent recession, and the things they have done that have either intentionally or unintentionally made the recession drag on far longer than it probably should have. And again, it's starting to drift way off the mark. Granted, there's no real leadership and there's no real central ideology, but there are people who are trying to make it basically a force for socialism or even communism. Again, I'm not conservative by any stretch of the imagination. I have conservative upbringings, but I myself am not a conservative. However, the fact that people are trying to make this into some kind of pro-socialism, pro-communism camp really bothers me. Because I tend to believe in balance in all things. I tend to believe that the world works in a balance between good and evil, light and dark, and yes, liberal and conservative. Unfortunately, I also tend to believe that the faces of liberalism and conservatism really aren't liberal or conservative at all. In fact, their ideologies, while seemingly in opposition to each other, are really just two sides of the same coin, which is basically, hey, we want power and we're going to do whatever it takes to keep it, even if it means going against our core ideals. Which is part of the reason why I'm apolitical, if not outright anti-political. But if I were to be political, I would classify myself as a centrist, maybe slightly left of center, but for the most part, right in the middle. To that end, it really bothers me that good ideas and noble goals get so easily corrupted in this country. And it's not like it's a human problem. It's not like human beings are incapable of keeping goals noble, calm, and focused. Case in point, earlier this year, the Egypt protest. The Egyptians stuck to one message, which is get Mubarak out, and the police are being unjust to us. We want change in our government because of the injustices perpetrated by Mubarak and the police forces. They didn't deliberately try to cause any trouble. You know, they just stood there, stayed to their message, stayed peaceful to the point where they didn't even defend themselves against the police. The army did that for them of their own volition. And probably the most important thing to note about the Egypt protests was that if anyone started acting like an idiot, they policed themselves. They got those people out of there because they knew that if one idiot started eating up all the face time, the goal that they really wanted would be shot to hell like that. And then when everything was over, they celebrated for an appropriate amount for as long as they felt was appropriate, then they cleaned up and went home. About as near close to perfect as you can get. And keep in mind, this isn't a country that, while it had a president, was still essentially a dictatorship. So, not exactly a free country like we in America purport we are. You know, there was no real protection of the right to free protest in Egypt. Hopefully there will be moving forward, but at the time there really wasn't, and that's why the police were being so unjustly against the people who were in Egypt protesting. On the other hand, here in the United States, the Tea Party's actually been civil in their debates, even if their ideas are just completely idiotic, or at least as long as their ideas didn't turn completely idiotic. The Occupy Wall Streeters, not so much. There's been some conflicts with the police, and yes, some of it can be attributed to the police department's acting stupid, getting a little antsy. But, you know, if you start getting in trouble with the police, there are only two reasons why the police would be acting with even non-lethal force against you. Either someone in control of the police is screwing up in the case of Oakland, or as is probably the case everywhere else that such has happened, somebody in the protesting camp screwed up. Either way, the protests they haven't completely broken down into mass chaos, but they are teetering on the edge of that. And as far as peaceful protests go, that's not a good place to be, because that's where your message starts to be getting undermined. That's where people start to look at your message and say, you know, do these people really speak for me? I mean, they started out okay, but are they going too far with this? And in the case of Occupy Wall Street, there are some people who are trying to go too far with this. There are people who are trying to insert things that just don't work, like a living wage regardless of working situation, or complete forgiveness of debts. You know, I can understand maybe a little leniency in the debt department, but complete forgiveness, no. And again, this is the United States of America. We have written out in plain English in the very first amendment to our Constitution, the legal document upon which this country was founded, that we have the right to assemble and peacefully protest, say anything we want about how we think our government's going, and not get in trouble for it. However, what I believe the problem is that people in this country tend to take that freedom of speech as carte blanche to say whatever the bloody heck that they want. And yes, technically they have the right to do that. Technically, they should not be getting in legal trouble for saying things about the government. But at the same time, humans are separated from animals by the fact that we have higher reasoning capabilities, meaning we possess the capability to think about our actions, discern consequences of what we might say and what we might do. Thus, we humans, in protesting, yes, should exercise our freedom, but at the same time, we need to realize that our words are going to have consequences, and our actions are going to come to some end, whether good or ill. As such, we have a responsibility to use said reasoning capability and use said knowledge to measure our words and decide whether what we're trying to say is really worth saying. If it's contrary to the original message that you're trying to get across as a protest group, if it's something completely out of left field compared to the grievances that you have, maybe you shouldn't say them. You know? Maybe you should leave certain things at home for the sake of getting the change you really want to see done. You know, I am all for accountability in government and in our economic system. I am completely for that. At the same time, I'm also for the capitalist system that we have that can work as long as people aren't idiots. And that includes the people not acting like idiots. You know, the people who are under this economic system who have benefited, or in this case not benefited, from the choices being made by the corporations. Everybody on every level needs to use some kind of brain power to figure out, you know, what they can do and what they can't do. You know, I like freedom of speech. If it weren't for freedom of speech, I couldn't be doing this right now. But part of the reason why I'm not talking very fast and why I'm not using abrasive language as much as I could is because I'm trying to measure my words, make my point in a clear and intelligent manner. And I'm trying to stick to this one point here. I know what my point is. I'm trying to stick to it. That is how you get things done. That is how you gain people to support you, and that is how you change the world. You pick something and you stick to it. You focus on it. You don't let people say stupid stuff to derail what you're trying to do. You know? You have to weigh everything into consideration because that is the special talent that we humans have, and we need to use it more often. You know? We need to use what God or nature, however you believe, has given us to realize that freedom is a great thing, but freedom used unwisely can be just as bad as not having any freedom at all. Bottom line, what I'm trying to say is that if this truly is the land of the free, as the old saying goes, freedom is not free. And not just in the sense that people have fought to preserve the fact that we have freedom, but freedom is not a privilege. And it's not a right, rather. Can't talk. Freedom is not a right or a privilege. It's a responsibility. Because when you are a free person, then if you want others to live in freedom, you need to be an example that other people want to follow. You can't just do everything just because you can. You have to do things because you really believe that's the right way to do. You have to be true to yourself, be true to what you believe, get that message across. Don't just say, I can do whatever I want. I live in a free country. I can say whatever I want. I live in a free country. Because, you know what? You're just going to look like a self-important jackass, pardon my language. If we want to be truly free in this country, we need to treat freedom as what it is. A responsibility to ourselves, to our fellow countrymen, and to the greater world. Don't be an idiot. Use your freedoms wisely.